Subscribe to our YouTube channel for in-depth interviews of India Inc. and press the bell icon so that you do not miss our updates.
Hello and welcome to Nirmal Bang, ladies and gentlemen. I am Hiral Dadia. Value creation to value creation, value conservation to value creation survey. PwC has carried out this survey which explores corporate India's journey through COVID-19 crisis. In fact, it covers the impact of the crisis, steps that were taken, evolution of priorities, the emerging new paradigm, and most importantly, the key interventions for near-term value conservation and long-term value creation. They conducted an anonymous online survey between the 17th of June 2020 and the 10th of July 2020. And the survey respondents were a mix of CXOs, senior managements from various industries in India. Let's understand as to what the survey actually meant, for all of us, and what does it actually take us through as well from here on going ahead. We have with us, joining us on the show, we have Aditya Mehra, partner deals at PwC, and Dilip Tully, partner deals at PwC, joining in. Over to you, Dilip.
Thanks, Hero. Thanks a lot. I hope you can hear me well. Um, so you're right. So we'll just quickly sort of spend maybe 5-7 minutes running through the key findings of the survey. And you're right. While it was an online survey, it wasn't free for all. It was specifically targeted at certain CEOs, CXOs, and also spread across the sectors that we looked at. And we'll explain that in detail later. But just quickly to sort of go through what we've seen in terms of findings and what the survey sort of pulls out. What we are seeing is that while obviously FY21, this 2021 is supposed to be a slightly whitewash year, where 73% organizations are seeing a decline in revenues. The year following that, the FY22, I think more than 82% companies are already expecting a revival by June 21, and 85% expect to see revenue growth for the whole year of FY22. So, broadly saying, I think, 4 and 5 people, corporates are optimistic about this whole rebound. And, the idea is that it's going to be sooner than later. It's going to start happening sooner. In terms of sectoral play, it's slightly different. We are seeing obviously healthcare, pharma, which has been resilient even now, and IT has been resilient even during these times because of circumstances. The surprise was on the consumer business side, where we are seeing one of the most impacted sectors looking at a recovery. Almost 90% organizations looking at recovery within a year's time. While the other business to the B2B sectors in terms of infra, industrial, etc., are going to be a bit slower. Because the issues were only magnified because of COVID. They already had issues existing even sort of before that. So, what we do see is that the priority is, currently what organizations are looking at, they are looking at demand rebound and cost optimization, which is a stark contrast to when the COVID crisis started. When the priorities were more about survival, about employee well-being, availability, continuity of operations. Now it's about looking forward, looking at demand coming back, optimizing cost. Liquidity continues to be a challenge. So the other point is that a lot of organizations are expecting the business environment to be tougher. So they're optimistic for sure, but they're also, and they know the challenges are not easy. They also know the environment is going to get tougher, but the optimism remains beyond. Besides that, a lot of companies, 70% of companies are looking at a more intense, sort of a competitive market play. They're looking at customers also becoming more price sensitive. So the supply side is competitive, demand side is competitive, and they're looking at higher costs. So these three, this sort of, brings aside the demonic trinity, I would say, everything that sort of puts pressure on companies. And, that's how we see, how do they want to come out of it is the whole new paradigm, or let's say, how are they seeing these things shaping up, and how do they expect this optimism despite these challenges? I think a lot of companies are relying on accelerating their digital journeys. A lot of people have seen the intense shock that the supply chains have brought in because of this crisis, and companies are looking at localizing a lot of their domestic manufacturing, sort of localizing manufacturing, sourcing, supply chains. Seems to be a small number with nearly 40%, but when you look at some of the sectors, look at industrials, you look at pharma, etc., there are more than 50% of those companies are looking at it. Larger companies are looking at it more because they are more reliant on imports. So any companies, or the companies with greater reliance on foreign geographies, are more inclined towards doing this. And obviously, it did not come as a surprise to us that people are looking at revamping their supply chains, looking at newer logistics and distribution models, whether it's analytics to support it, and whether to build resilience through multimodal logistics or building redundancy in the system. I think this has also come out as an overwhelming response, specifically in the operations heavy companies. Um, Also, what a clear theme emerging is that a lot of companies are looking at partnerships and collaborations much more openly. They don't want to invest a lot of money today, but they need a lot of support. They need a lot of redundancy, as we mentioned. So a lot of that comes from from collaboration, partnerships, working within the localized spheres of which they can operate in. And then maybe not such a large one, but still over 30% of respondents are looking at new products and services that are coming out, which are which are based on emerging themes and affordability. So so these are the new paradigms. They're obviously looking at the standard interventions on optimizing cost, reconfiguring their distribution logistics model, etc. But these are the new paradigms which are going to sort of be be more accelerated in terms of an innovative approach. In this environment, also, I think we are seeing there is there's a lot of robustness for deals happening in the market. We are seeing that more than 45% organizations are looking at this from a consolidation perspective. Some of them are, yes, looking at stress assets, but a larger number are looking at this for strategic growth and consolidation. Only 20% of people are looking at divestments right now. This is actually a decline. If you look at all surveys done last year, a third of companies are looking at divestments. But I think right now, I think the assumption is that with the valuation sort of going down, people are a bit wary of going pushing the pedal on the divestment route currently. And then obviously a fourth of the companies are looking at fundraising, whether debt or equity. So this is how we sort of summarize, the whole sort of journey, repair, rethink, reconfigure, where we're looking at people have come out of the survival phase. We are going through a value conservation phase, and just on the cusp of getting into the value creation phase. Sort of summarizing all the interventions that we have here. So we've discussed most of these, in the previous slides. So won't go more to it. But all this is being done, and what are companies looking to get out of it? How are they defining success? I think the largest population, the 34% of them, are looking at building more resilient organizations, making them more resilient to future shocks. There are companies which are looking at this as opportunities. We were looking at 19% looking to gain market share, or 12% looking to gain competitive advantage, while others are being more defensive in terms of being happy to achieve, let's say, cash flow break even, or preventing any sort of major employee attrition. So we have seen that people are looking more forward. Again, it comes out again more here that their standards for definition are much higher than just survival. They're looking beyond that. So this is a gist of the survey. Obviously, the survey is a bit longer, and this is just coming out the key findings. But obviously, the survey is available on the PwC microsite, which also has sector cuts, within them, size cuts, etc. On the microsite, we'll encourage the audience to maybe check that out. It's free for download. Thank you.
Right. Thanks a lot, Dilip, for giving us a gist of the entire survey. In fact, let's just get to our question answer session as well. Aditya, let me come to you. Dilip has already presented the key findings of the survey right now. Firstly, if you could just understand what is the kind of methodology that was used with regards to where the survey goes.
Sure. So, the survey was for CXOs, specifically CEOs, CFOs, and strategy officers, and we were very cognizant of their time. So we wanted something which was impactful and short. So there was an online questionnaire with 12 questions, which was sent out. We sent it out to all sectors except financial services and private equity, because the dynamics there are slightly different. We got a great response. We got about 225 responses across sectors. Industrials was very well represented by 25%, RNC by 18%, ITES, infra, pharma, so on and so forth. So fairly well, well recognized across sectors. Even as far as the size of companies are concerned, it was quite well spread. A majority of them were the smaller 500 crores and below, which also included the whole startup ecosystem. We had a very large chunk of about 36% of respondents, which came from the 500 to 5,000 crore revenue bucket. And we had about 16% of the respondents who were above 5,000 crores. We used some analytical tools to really collate the data and analyze it in totality as well as from a sector by sector perspective.
Right. So with this methodology that we've used, Dilip, if we have to first look at the kind of challenges that were faced, because the survey clearly envisages everything from what started with COVID to where we are now, what have been the key challenges that have been faced according to the survey, not only during the lockdown phase, but even post COVID? What would be the challenges as well that the companies and organizations would look to face?
Yeah, I think we did touch upon this, but I think COVID is here to stay for a while, so it's not yet post COVID. So it's about the start of the COVID, and post unlock is how we sort of looked at it. What happened after unlock and how do you see the future? So as you mentioned, we've seen a clear evolution of priorities or challenges, from ensuring survival, which we call the repair phase, in our methodology, to really going towards rethinking and reconfiguring their operations to really come out of this crisis. So in March, when this started and corporates realized this as an issue, they were more worried on employee well-being and availability of manpower, with the whole reverse migration being the biggest issue, and obviously resulting into the whole continuity of the supply chain operations. Now with the unlock, what we've seen in obviously with various surveys, and it's supported by our survey, that manpower is no longer a big challenge, probably because more than 2/3 of manpower has returned to the cities and demand hasn't really come back so far. So manpower is not that big of a challenge right now. So continuity also sort of with the whole unlock, logistics distribution have improved. So now people are looking at more how to sort of the biggest challenge now is how to get back demand, how to really optimize cost. And liquidity continues to be a challenge, but because of obviously valuation issues and all, fundraising, etc., it becomes a bit challenging. And while the banks, etc., have, while RBI has helped with the moratorium, etc., which are more temporary measures, and now with the restructuring scheme coming up, gives a little bit more, permanent relief in that sense. But I think this is where we stand today. Where we're looking at challenges on demand and cost, and sort of improving liquidity being the largest ones.
Right. So if we have to take these challenges into consideration as well, again, getting demand is something what everyone has been talking about, where there is a lot of support that's coming in on the supply side from the government. Now, demand creation is where the government also needs to really come out and concentrate on. Now, if we have to talk about demand creation right now, yes, we know there is going to be an impact on top lines of majority of the companies. We did touch upon that as well in the presentation. But Aditya, if you could dwell more on that as to what is the anticipated impact on revenues and businesses over the next 2 years? Because, when we talk to analysts as well, everyone's literally discounting FY21. And on the earnings front, everyone is looking at estimates with regards to FY22. So how is that scenario expected to look like?
Yeah. One of the key questions of the survey was to understand what would be the impact on, the near-term revenues. And unfortunately, 3/4 of the respondents will see a decline in the revenues in FY20. The main reasons would be, because demand has collapsed. There was huge disruptions in the supply chain, and because of liquidity concerns. But keeping this aside, there's still 27% of the respondents who, despite this once in a lifetime kind of crisis, have said that they don't expect any decline, or they might actually increase revenues in FY21, which I think is quite heartening. If 1 in 4 really say that despite all that we've seen, they will still be resilient. Now, these 1 in 4 have obviously been impacted through because of some tailwinds, uh, but more importantly, I think they have been more nimble to really react and anticipate what the challenges are and how they adapt to those challenges. So it's just not that they had favorable tailwinds. I think the organizations themselves were nimble enough to really act at the right time.
Right.
Also, about almost 60%, of the resilient companies mentioned that crisis management was key for them to really claw back from the negative impact. Now, having said that, that's the situation for FY21. Moving to FY22, and that's where the good news is. Despite all that we see in FY22, 85% of the respondents see positive growth in FY22. There's only 15% who see a decline in FY22. So thereby meaning that there is widespread optimism. There's a lot of short-term pain, but I think if you can tide over that short-term pain, FY22 would be fine.
Right. So, Aditya, if you have to actually divide these in terms of sectors, just to follow up on this, which sectors would you place out of the survey who have been the most resilient versus the most impacted, if you have to give the top 3 of each?
Sure. So I think, the most resilient sectors have been ITES, IT sector, healthcare and pharma, and essential services.
Okay.
I think these were the 3, cornerstones, sectors which really did reasonably well. In terms of the sectors which were really badly affected, RNC, retail and consumer, but this is the non-essential side, was very badly affected. The infrastructure sector, very badly affected, and so was the real estate sector.
Right. So, if you have to talk about this as well, as you mentioned, of the ones which have been really affected bad, especially in terms of infrastructure, real estate, you talk about media, entertainment, logistics, these have been sectors which are again saying that probably there could be a tougher business environment going ahead. If that is the situation, Dilip, what are the key themes that would be emerging with regards to the new paradigm, with the new shift that we are seeing from here on?
Yeah. Thanks, Hero. So I think, while we touched upon it broadly, so let's say, we were looking at technology very, very, aggressively now with accelerating the entire digital enablement piece. And this also cuts across all the verticals, whether it's about increasing sales, whether it's about optimizing, ensuring remote working. So, a large part of them are sort of looking at strengthening the robust, their whole remote working systems, because a lot of people put some, frugal innovations to really be in touch. Automation and robotics, I think, is something that's going to drive the game more from a medium-term perspective because of investments involved. But we're also seeing a lot of push on the sales angle, where we're looking at a lot of B2C businesses, and surprisingly also the B2B businesses looking at online, sort of online sales improvements, looking at that channel to sell, and also looking at technology to really accelerate sales, whether it is a technology like a CRM or it's an app-based system to control the sales force. I think they're very aggressively looking at all these options to really look at the whole sales revival. We are seeing nearly 40% of companies looking at either localizations, new supply chain models, and sort of collaboration that we sort of discussed. And when we discuss when we discuss the whole new products, that they want to get into, which are primarily based on getting adjacent products into it without having much of investments. There are a lot of emerging themes in the market. There is a lot of DIY stuff. Let's say from a consumer simplistic angle, there is DIY. There is the whole work from home, occasion wear to sort of work from home wear sort of theme and apparel. There are many themes emerging right now. Capitalizing on those themes, and also looking at affordability as a very big thing. because companies do realize that the consumer sentiment is not that positive. We're seeing some fluctuations, but if you look at the whole consumer sentiment, it is varying between um, you know varying between restoring expenditure to cutting expenditure. Very few people looking at increasing their expenditure in the next 1 year.
Mm.
So that's why these themes are supposed to counteract and help companies emerge out stronger.
Right. So Dilip, do you think there could be possibility of new business models that could emerge, for companies from here on?
No. In fact, actually what we've seen is that you're right. So business models, one part is on the whole supply chain part. Logistics models have evolved very significantly. Like I said, people are going to go more into multimodals, more into building redundancy. But even the fundamental business models have already started changing. We have seen companies who are essentially I would say, B2B companies extending into the whole B2B2C channels, going maybe direct to consumer also, looking at online to really service because of the lack of chains anywhere else. But they're also, a lot of them are looking also, especially in the consumer sector, they're looking at a lot of platforms. We're looking at the whole, C2B2C coming out of there. So models are changing for sure. People are looking at collaborations to really, expand their service offerings, models. The flip side is that people are also planning to get into a lot of things at this point of time.
Correct.
So I think it's a bit of we are a bit of a cusp. People are trying to find their ground as to how to really improve revenues very quickly, because it's about not only their own survival, it is also the survival of their supply chain. That's what they've been going through. So there have been a lot of pivots even in the lockdown period, but now things are stabilizing, and we are definitely seeing a lot of business models emerge. To summarize, on the back end, but also as well as the consumer facing angle is concerned. For example, B2B companies are now looking at online sales very aggressively, which was a slower theme to adopt, but now it's coming out much faster.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's something which we have seen as well, where people who are resilient with regards to where online is concerned, they have a lot of, online sales as a component of their revenues, where they were expecting, say, to achieve from 5 years down the line, they are already on track to probably achieve the same in the next 12 to 18 months. So you are seeing that change come in. And one point that Dilip mentioned with regards to localization as well, Aditya, if you could elaborate on that, with localization, do you think all sectors will be able to achieve this? That's number one. And how important does co-opetition become over here? Because now people are not looking at competition because of the current situation. Everyone wants to try to work together to get out of this situation, and that's why people are adopting co-opetition as a fact. What is your sense on localization and co-opetition?
So localization has come out as a very strong theme out of this survey. The top theme was digital enablement, which Dilip alluded to. But the second most important theme was localization. Now, localization and this whole theme, whether you want to put the geopolitical issues into one of the reasons, or you want to put the commercial issues, but almost 40% of the respondents said that they are evaluating localization. This number varies across sectors. There are some sectors, for example, the industrial sector, where 60% of the respondents are talking about localization. There's the pharma sector where about 50% are talking about, but there are other sectors where the proportion is much less. But overall, it's almost 40%. But I think at the same time, corporate India has been circumspect also on this whole localization thing. They do understand the challenges of localization.
Right.
Nothing is really expected to happen overnight. It's a process. It will take time. Corporate India is going to evaluate this whole theme. There are certain challenges, which corporate India is aware of and will first have to get their heads around before you can actually see action on the ground. These challenges for localization are more to do with higher costs in India, lower efficiency, availability of raw material, availability of ecosystem, availability of infrastructure. So unless and until some of these challenges corporate India gets answers to some of these challenges and are able to mitigate the impact, I think the whole localization theme will certainly play out, but it will play out over a period of time. And this is what really has led to this whole collaboration model, where people are I have looked at it fairly dispassionately, saying that how can we augment each other's capabilities, and now they are looking outward, rather than the whole inward perspective of what can I do, how quickly can I do it, how cheaply can I do it. The whole conversation has moved on to how quickly can we do it, how cheaply can we do it. And that theme also has come out very clearly in collaboration. There are some certain sectors where this collaboration will be higher. For example, the media and entertainment sector we see will be a sector where we'll see much more collaboration. We see that smaller companies, smaller in revenue companies, are much more open to collaboration as opposed to very large companies. So some of these themes have really come out quite well. I think the whole localization paradigm is going to certainly play out, but it will play out over the next 2 to 3 years.
Right. So with all of this, the kind of, thoughts that we have with regards to what organizations need to adopt, Dilip, what will be the best path to recovery that the organizations can adopt from here on in terms of, say, to emerge stronger from this crisis? These are the do's that they need to look at, according to you.
So I think that's a tricky question. It's very subjective. All organizations have very different issues. Like we said, there are resilient sectors which demand was not an issue. There are companies which had a lot of demand but did not have a supply chain, sort of to serve it. So I think the issues are fairly diverse. So difficult to capture at one. But what the survey shows very clearly is that if you were to think of it systematically, the whole journey that we said, repair, rethink, reconfigure, where employees, where they've taken care of survival bit, where they're rethinking whether it's the whole product innovation angle, whether it's the logistics models, cross-scaling, upskilling employees, cash conservation, to really getting into the next level to really rebound, looking at diversifying. So there are companies looking at diversifying into newer segments to sort of de-risk future businesses. There is the whole angle of automation, localization we discussed. They're looking at M&A very aggressively right now to really take it to the next level. Obviously the whole optimization angle, etc. there, but what fundamentally will happen, and what we have seen after the survey came out in our discussions, is that there have been many systemic frictions within organizations, within the economy for a long time, which have taken the back seat because there were far more pressing things to do, like addressing growth. So the good thing, as a silver lining of growth going out, is people start looking how to really permanently have some good solutions. So right now organizations are thinking of that how do we remove these permanent systemic inefficiencies out of the systems. A lot of them are working towards it, and this is where we come out with a new sort of thought leadership, which is about full recovery potential, which is more looking at the medium term, but it's also bringing out very similar themes. How to permanently remove these issues so we can emerge stronger. Having said that, we do have a tendency, as soon as things get back on track, people have the fear that we'll go back to our old ways. Hopefully, this is a jolt. This is a much bigger one than any of the crises we've seen earlier. So this can be that potential, drive or the trigger to really, solve for all problems, that have lingered on for a long time.
Right. So, Dilip, that's an important point that you've made over here as well. If, we've spoken about the impact in terms of FY21, the kind of degrowth that we could see in FY22 as well in terms of the revenues. But Aditya, what do you think? When do you think we could see a recovery to pre-COVID levels on an overall basis? Any anticipation, any number crunching on that front?
Yeah, so that was, one of the key questions, and for obvious reasons, everyone wants to know, when are they going to come back to normal? And frankly, we were quite happy with the responses. Now, 82% of the total, respondents expect to reach pre-COVID revenue run rates by June of 21. So which is fairly heartening. Now there are certain sectors which will reach that level faster. There are certain sectors which will reach that level slightly, slightly more, slightly later. Uh, I think in terms of the IT sector, the healthcare and pharma sector, by June 2021, they are expected to almost reach 90% of their pre-COVID run rates. Now, within the IT sector, the companies which are providing cyber-related services, automation-related services, will really lead the recovery. Pharmaceuticals companies will certainly recover faster than healthcare companies. But this is on the positive side. Now, on the negative side, if you look at media and entertainment or some of the B2B companies, they will take a little bit more time to reach pre-COVID run rates. Now, one very interesting observation is on the retail and consumer side. Retail and consumer sector was very badly impacted, but the recovery is the steepest in retail and consumer. And within retail and consumer also, I think the essential services and commodities will recover faster than the more discretionary ones.
Absolutely. Aditya, what you mentioned about retail and consumption is also a fact, because when I have a conversation with a lot of companies, I mean, the pure play FMCG companies, what's happened with them is the quantum of sales that they lost with regards to institutional clients, they've already started recovering at least equivalent or probably more from their B2C channels. So that's something which is giving you an indication at least that the volume growth of all of these FMCG companies is somewhere going to be maintained or probably higher, and that's how optimistic they have been. So that's something which is fairly, strong on the consumption side. So Dilip, overall with the entire survey that we've done right now, we have picked up great insights from you and Aditya, but any closing comments that you would want to highlight? Dilip, you're on mute.
My apologies. So thanks, Hiral. I think the overall message remains the same, that how fast do we actually reconfigure our operations to really bounce back faster, and not lose sight of the goal, and not really look at things slightly improving and then getting back to track, because this is still going to be uncertain. There will be unlocks and lockdowns at some places. And there are sectors which are still struggling a lot, especially let's say, discretionary spends are still struggling a lot, right? Like Apple, etc., which are slowly gaining steam, but models are changing for sure. So I think it is still, I think by the end of December, we should have a very, very clear view, and we might actually follow this up with another sort of pulse survey to sort of come out and see how it's actually doing in the market. So I think that's about it. Best of luck to us and the economy to really come back fast.
Absolutely. Aditya, anything from you on closing comments?
Sure. If you look at the survey in totality and just try and go one level deeper into why is corporate India responding the way they have responded. One very clear theme which comes out is resilience. In each and every action, in each and every intervention that corporate India has tick marked in our survey, there is a resilience angle. Growth is fundamental to corporate India's DNA, no doubt. But this survey has brought that resilience dimension. And going forward, what we will see is that the boardrooms are going to not only talk about growth, but each and every decision is going to be passed through the lens of resilience, just to ensure that your business model can stand the test of time.
Absolutely. Resilience is a new factor that everyone is going to consider from here on. So thank you, Dilip. Thank you, Aditya, so much for presenting the survey to us as well, and for the great insights that we've picked up. We will come back to you once again once you come back with your next survey to understand as to how things have improved and what scenario we stand at. But good luck to all of you as well, and stay safe, and see you back soon at Nirmal Bang. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
for
much.
Thanks.